Hey everybody, thanks for joining the sustainability panel discussion extravaganza that we're going to have here. Myself and Talia, and we're going to have a special guest, Claudia Vecchio from Sonoma County Tourism, who's also going to join us also. She's coming over from IPW right now. So the time we're going to spend together, we're going to accomplish a couple of things. So Talia and I are going to walk you through, we're going to take a below surface dive into this idea of sustainability. And from what it looked like before, nearly everybody has some form of sustainability currently happening within your destination or your organization. So we're going to frame it within that. The worksheets that you have here, and if sustainability is totally new, that's great too. All this information is going to apply to you. The worksheets that you have here, the second half of this, we're going to break into kind of a workshop mode, and there are two stages to this workshop, and don't worry about what they are now. But just in terms of framing, view this as an audit tool rather than a starting place tool. Because I know many of you have some really great programs in the room. Some of you already use Leave No Trace, looking at Arizona. But we'll use this as an audit tool and kind of frame it in that way. Before Talia and I dive into this presentation and this workshop and what this is all about, I do want to give an acknowledgement to the original people who existed here in what we call Orlando. So what we refer to as public and private lands in Orlando are the traditional homes of the Muskogee, the Miccosukee, and the Timoka, and many other tribes who made their homes in what is referred to as Florida. Additionally, today in Florida, there are two federally recognized tribes, the Miccosukee tribe of Indians in Florida and the Seminole tribe of Florida. The Seminoles there are 4 reservations, Seminole reservations in Florida as well. And so from a Leave No Trace perspective, from a stewardship, sustainability, and inclusiveness perspective, we think it's important to acknowledge this because as we work to inspire individuals to take care of the natural world when recreating outdoors, we want to honor and acknowledge the indigenous people who have been stewards since time immemorial. Leave No Trace is very new, very westernized approach to stewardship, and indigenous peoples all across the globe have been approaching sustainability and stewardship for eons before we came or before any of us started talking about what sustainability looks like. So I just wanted to kick that off there. If you're curious about learning more about either of these tribes, they do have websites. I encourage you to check it out since you're here. Learning from the tribe itself is the best place to learn about their story, their culture. As Talia mentioned, it's important to hear it from the people who their lived experiences reflect the stories. So check them out. There's a lot of great information there. So sustainable tourism. You're going to see me walking around and floating because I can't stand to stay at a podium the entire time. So we talked a little bit about sustainable tourism development being 3 big factors. So there's the environmental, the social culture, and the economical. But we want to take a deeper dive into what this means. And I'm confident that when you all think about sustainability, these are 3 big pillars that you have. Is there anything that's not on here that you think about when you think about sustainability for your destinations? Are these 3 hitting the marks for the most part? Okay. So this is our starting place, but we're going to expand into a much deeper area. I talked earlier about the idea that no matter what it's called, ecotourism, green tourism, regenerative tourism, having a definition for what your what your destination is focused on, what it means to you, that is really the starting place that you should have. And so I offer this definition up from the World Tourism Organization: tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. So those pillars, environment, cultural, and economic, need to relate to needs of visitors, needs of your communities, the industries, the partners that are a part of that, and certainly the community on a holistic level. For some of you, this may be a great definition. This, for me, it's a little more on the academic side than I would like. If Leave No Trace's definition, or if I was a destination, I'm talking about tourism, I want to put a little more story behind it. I want to give a little more warmth into it, but I still think it's a great starting place because it has those big pillars that we talked about, and then the different stakeholders that are receiving the benefits as a result of that. There are so many names in sustainability, and this is not even all of them. There are many out there. Names can be really great. Names can be great from like an academic sense when we study what tourism is and we study the impacts of it, and we need to put them into categories and boxes so that survey work or different instruments that we're using to collect data make sense, and we can say, well, this type of tourism is this, and this is here, and the data's plugging in here. When we're creating sustainability or when we're auditing sustainability, try your best to put these on the shelf and look at them later. So I mentioned them before: ecotourism, green tourism, soft tourism, rural tourism, regenerative tourism, community tourism, equitable tourism, solidarity tourism, and responsible tourism. How many of you do you think your consumers know what any of those things would mean? Maybe ecotourism, maybe green tourism, like generally speaking, but it's probably really general. I mentioned before that, like, where are the future things going? And this idea that tourism we're supporting a community through tourism. We're supporting a destination through those efforts, and that's related to regenerative tourism. So even with all these different names aside, and it's a little hard to see with the light, but this graphic of regenerative tourism, each of those 5 things has about 15 things listed underneath it. And if you are like already into sustainability, if you're already gone through a few audits, if you're kind of thinking of that and you're like into these names and want to get into that, there is a lot of great information about regenerative tourism that's out there. We at Leave No Trace think it's a really great holistic approach to regenerative tourism. You all will have access to this PowerPoint deck that has that much more apparent, and it also has the source on there so you can see it kind of blown up. That's a 11 by 17 poster-sized resource there that's been condensed. So many names. Try not to focus on the name. I asked before if anybody felt like they could describe sustainable tourism, your efforts, in 30 seconds. Does anybody feel more confident about that? Does anybody feel less confident about that? Or maybe about the same? So working on that definition is good. Workshop it internally as much as you need to. Because if you don't understand it, your consumers are going to be very confused and they are not going to understand it. And no matter what label you associate with it, there's still going to be confusion. So take the time to figure it out. What are the elements of sustainable tourism? What are we doing and who is it serving? And then you can link that to your organization's values and to your mission and all those great things that can surround a definition. But think about the definition first and come back to this later. And there are way more terms here. What I think you will find, what I have found in my experience, I should say outside of Leave No Trace, I work in the adventure tourism industry. I work as a ski guide in Norway and on the polar ice cap. And so when our company talks about our sustainable tourism efforts, I know we link to ecotourism and responsible tourism and rural tourism. It's not just one thing that we do. And I would fare to guess that for many of you, it's not going to be just one thing. And you should feel good about that because all of these things are linked. And we should talk about them because they are linked. We should celebrate that these things are interconnected. And sometimes we might focus more on rural, and other times we might focus a little more on the equitable side of things, even though they are connected into one another. So, big takeaway, refine your definition, be okay with the process to the extent you can. It may take a lot of time because there are a lot of conversations that you may need to have. Jake wanted me to touch on how do you budget for sustainability, and you all have already started this journey in some way, shape, or form. The important thing about this, and I'm confident you all know it, but I wanted to say out loud, is that your budget for sustainability has to be sustainable. It can't just be the one-time injection of fundings that you get from an EDA grant or that you get from something. It has to be something that carries forward. And I know in talking with many of you so far and many of the partners that Leave No Trace works with, stewardship and sustainability, whether it's for the outdoors or the community, it's a commitment, and it's something that your budget commits to over time. The good news is, if you are starting off kind of in the newer side of the spectrum, or like the entry point side of the spectrum, there are ways that you can on-ramp into this. So you don't have to have thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to put towards sustainability. Talia gave us some really great recommendations on inclusion and some checklist things there. There are many of those things that relate to sustainability. They're not independent of one another. They're very linked. So while you are figuring out what your budget is and how it can be sustainable over time and who you need to talk to about that, whether it's your board of directors or the city or the state, whoever it might be, they're kind of the low-hanging fruit that you can on-ramp into this and have it be really meaningful. It doesn't take really any budget to start conversations with people. It doesn't take any budget to reach out to land managers that are adjacent to your destination and say, hey, we've never worked together before, but this is what we want to do, and this is why it's important. So you can scale up. There are counties and states that have put a lot of dollars in their budget towards sustainability and towards stewardship and all these ideas, and that produces a lot of great effect for the community. But to get started, just know you can on-ramp and take your time for it, but be intentional. It's kind of like when we merge on the highway. When you do use the on-ramp, you don't get on the on-ramp and then stop and then wait for traffic to let you in, unless you live in Boulder, Colorado, because that's how they drive. I can say that as a Chicagoan who lives in Boulder, Colorado. Instead, we want to get on the on-ramp, but we want to keep moving, and we want to merge with traffic. So that means, like, while you're approaching the low-hanging fruit, make sure that you're still keeping the gas on. What's my budget look like for next year? What resources do I need to put in place for fiscal year 23, 24, et cetera? How can this be sustainable? There are many areas that have partner programs that build into sustainability that are cost-free. There are some others that are not cost-free. Heidi Walters, who was telling us about North Carolina today, their office's model allows them to have a revenue-generating partner program, and so they tap into corporate partners and they tap into community partners to be a part of Outdoor NC, and that is one of the ways that they help to put assets into the community, that they can engage with research and figuring out what's going on top of what they've cooked into their budget as well. It also creates a little bit of buy-in for partners. Talia is going to talk, in that mind with budgeting and what that looks like and what that means, transitioning and marketing. Talia is going to talk through a little bit of sustainable tourism marketing for us to kind of give us the landscape and the blueprint for what that can look like. And I'm sure this will resonate with many of you, but some kernels that you'll be able to take away as well.
Hi again, everybody. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about sustainable tourism marketing and why you might want to do it. So of course, as a destination, you really think about marketing, and that's kind of your bread and butter. But these days, especially with the next generation, people really do care about sustainability. So first of all, if you're trying to meet the needs of your audience, it does align with the values of your target customer. Maybe not all of your target customers, but I think the next generation especially, Gen Z really values this. The next thing, really, sustainability does allow for a better visitor experience. No one wants to go to a beach that's full of people and full of trash, right? That's not fun. You're not going to post on social media that you had the best vacation of your life. You're going to post pictures of the trash. You're going to talk about why you shouldn't go to this place, and you're going to complain about it. So really, if you're trying to provide a great sustainability does allow for a better visitor experience. So it really does accomplish your main goals as a destination. It also keeps your product pristine for future generations. So that, to me, should be your number one reason. So if you trash your natural spaces, and this is a big part of what Leave No Trace talks about, is really preserving the places you love to enjoy them. If you're trashing that place, you don't get it back. You know, you can't just go back and regrow all the trees and unpollute the water. So you really have to think about your main marketing asset is your experience. So you have to think about how you're going to keep that experience sustainably maintained for future economic development. So it's really all about economic development at the end of the day, right? We all have to get money from the government or from different sources or maybe from our hotels. So if there's nothing for the visitor to experience or that visitor experience isn't great, then you're not going to be able to drive revenue for your destination, which helps fund infrastructure and all sorts of great things that tourism does. Lastly, I think especially as far as marketing and how you market and what you select to market, it can really help with seasonality and spread out visitor impact. So when I was working at Brand USA for several years, we started to think about, I call this the Grand Canyon problem. So we would put the Grand Canyon in like literally everything, like the cover of our visitor guides and every social post, and I'm like, it's so crowded. Like, why are we telling people to only go to the Grand Canyon? Like, there's so many people there. And I'm not saying the Grand Canyon isn't incredible, but this is an opportunity as a destination to think about, there's the Grand Canyon, but actually Aztec National Monument, which is not that far away, has an incredible canyon. There's never anyone there. I've been there twice. We were the only people there. Thinking about how you can tell people, this is great, but there's actually this place that's a couple hours away. Spend money in that community, send people there. So I think a lot of destinations are thinking about marketing as a tool to even out seasonality, and then to also help your destination. It's not helpful if one town is always slammed and the next town over gets no one. So you really have the power just in the visuals and the timing, thinking about booking windows, promote the Grand Canyon in the winter when no one's there because they need that business, but think about shifting that demand to another asset or another partner when they need that business. So it's really effective from that standpoint, and I think as you all talk to your partners, which every destination does, that's really effective for them. You can go on. I'm like, I don't have a clicker, so.
I think that's your case studies coming up in a little while.
Okay.
So there's a mindset with marketing, destination marketing organizations. There have been shifts, though. Destination management organizations, destination stewardship organizations. Tomorrow you're going to hear a little bit about what's going on in Sonoma County, California. But think about what Talia said, and as that relates to your budget, you can on-ramp those efforts as well. Again, what's your low-hanging fruit, but how can you keep pushing the gas to make sure that you have the budget needs or the budget resources that you need to work with partners to compensate indigenous community members for their time, for their work with you, because that should not be free. What are resources that you need? What are the marketing kind of outputs that you need to put all your great communications through? What evaluation are you going to do to make sure that your sustainability efforts are actually working? We talked earlier about impression metrics being really the measure of success for sustainability right now, but long-term, or medium-term, long-term, it's going to shift into outcomes-based measurement, because it has to. Because you can't say we're sustainable because 9 million people saw this post. You need to say we're sustainable because 83% of our total visitor population believe that they are more aware of environmental impacts or community impacts as a result of their trip to our destination and because they saw that advertising on social media. That's what success can look like. And then you have benchmarks that you can grow from. It's also important when thinking about sustainability to think about how you organize your brain. A lot of people, whether it's sustainability and sometimes DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it falls into this trap too, is that we want to bring this into our organization, but we want to make it a part of what we do. So we want to Lego it on to our existing work. And that's what the Venn diagram here that shows weak sustainability is meant to picture. It's showing that sustainability is brought into society, it's brought into the natural resource, but it's not centered. None of those things are centered in that model, except for what this researcher is calling sustainable development. There have been updates to this model, though, that show what strong sustainability can look like, where it's based at the economy level, but it serves the society and community, and everything goes back to that to the extent that it can. And then society is serving the natural world that's around it. So if you're anchoring, think of this as an anchor. And so the strongest anchor that you have is when everything is going to be nested in it. It's really weighted, it's really supported. When you have the three Venn diagram here in this model representation, everything can fracture very easily. It's not supporting itself. Nature's only being supported a little bit by the economy and society, but there's still a bit of it that's kind of left on its own. And the same would be for the community or the economy itself. So this is just a visual representation about how we can shift our mindset to think how the nesting effect takes place for sustainability. When you, again, making sure that the economy is serving the community, and the community then serves the natural and surrounding world around it. And that's a really simplistic way to like talk about this philosophy here, but think about how you include sustainability now. Do you center it? Does anybody feel like their sustainability model is on this end of the spectrum right now? Does anybody feel like it's on this end of the spectrum? A few heads nodding. It's okay that it's on this end of the spectrum, because that's your starting place. But now that you're more aware of it, you're a little more aware of it, you can work towards this. It's not this binary either or. So think of it as a spectrum, and the more you're moving this way in time, because this isn't going to happen overnight, the more you're moving this way, the stronger it's going to get over time, and more things that you can build into it. So we're going to talk about 5 different case studies that Talia and I want to share with you. The first case study is actually going to be shared by special guest Claudia Vecchio from Sonoma County Tourism. And she's going to share with you the very, I think, novel, and based on all the partner work that I've done in my space in travel and tourism, there aren't a lot of people who have brought land managers in at the ground level for their sustainability and stewardship efforts. Some have, not everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to Claudia to share for a little bit about what Sonoma County Tourism is doing with Sonoma County Regional Parks in California.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. Good to see some familiar faces. So I'm hoping you'll join us tomorrow as we kind of talk about Sonoma County's journey into destination stewardship, because a lot of things that Andrew was talking about we faced in our early on times when we did more from a destination marketing organization. We are now an official destination stewardship organization. You'll see that on our contracts. You'll see it everywhere. So it's not just a nice thing to say. We really are taking it seriously, so I hope you'll join us tomorrow. But what Andrew was talking about is this partnership that we didn't even think it was novel. I mean, we work with partners, as all of you do if you're in the destination organization world, and one of our great partners is our regional parks. And if you've been to Sonoma County, you've seen Sonoma County, we are an agricultural place. I mean, we grow grapes, we don't grow turnips or, other kinds of corn, but we get to grow grapes. So, I always say we're in these positions and we have an impact on this destination for a nanosecond of the totality. How are we to not be good stewards of this place? So I mean, it's absolutely within our realm of existence to make sure we are. So we have another organization. It's actually a government organization. We're 501c6, but our regional parks are a government organization, and it was very clear to us very early on in this journey that partnering with the government was a good idea because we are funded by the government. We get bed tax and we get some other ways. So while it may seem like it was a really smart decision from a sustainability standpoint, it was a kind of selfish decision from a budget standpoint and from a funding standpoint that we knew we needed to have a solid partner. So we started to look down the road and you'll also have a session tomorrow afternoon about all the different types of organizations there are to join, and there are a labyrinth of them. But as we were looking at that kind of partnership with a bigger organization that could help us down this road, we partnered with the parks because they have a very, first of all, we have a great series of parks throughout Sonoma County. But they've also started down this road, as most parks and land managers have, with how do they be sustainable. And so when we were looking at partners, Leave No Trace was a really good one for us. And what I'll say is that there's a really practical approach to sustainability with 7 principles, and the parks wanted to include 7 principles, and so it was an easy thing for people to understand and users of these properties to be able to incorporate. So I loved the practicality of it. So when we brought in the parks, we started down the road of putting in these 7 principles. And are you all with destinations, or you are not all of you? But have you noticed a difference in the way travelers are traveling these days? They're really, with lots of people calling them novice travelers, and they're behaving pretty badly and leaving a lot of trash. So the principles that Leave No Trace brought to us, and especially the parks, because they very much are managers of these destinations, made really good sense, and they helped us mitigate these issues around these travelers behaving badly and leaving a lot of trash at our coastlines and the beaches and such. So I won't go on and on because we'll have a brief time, 20 minutes tomorrow, to talk more about Sonoma County, but just to say, when we partnered with the parks, there were a lot of different reasons for it, but it has been a really rich partnership for us, and both from a partnership with the funding situation, but that it also has now opened up. To the north of us, we have Mendocino County. To the south of us, we have Marin County. They're seeing what we're doing with the parks. They're now integrating our partnership and Leave No Trace with those counties too, because again, it's a practical approach to sustainability. I think that's really important. You can take a very ethereal approach and people will be like, yeah, whatever. But this is a really great way for us to do that partnership, and we look forward to lots of years. And the other thing they do is they put in these principles, but then they also do this whole educational program with our partners, and we loved that too, to help bring along our entire destination. So more tomorrow, but thanks, Andrew, for a chance to talk a little bit about what we do with Sonoma County, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But Leave No Trace, really, we are the 3-legged stool. We are tourism, we are the parks, and we are Leave No Trace as we're moving down this destination stewardship road.
Any questions for Claudia? Well, Claudia, thanks for coming by to share about Sonoma County and what we're doing with Sonoma County Regional Parks.
Yeah, and it has been, we just did, if you're at a destination marketing stewardship management organization, we just had our budget conversation with our elected officials the other day, and 2 of them who were really opposed to what we're doing, and you know how that can be. A couple of years ago, said, thank you for what you're doing with Leave No Trace, thank you what you're doing with stewardship, you got your money. I mean, this was the reason why we were able to move forward with funding, so I can't herald it enough, so thank you.
Thanks, Claudia. Thank you. Another great thing that a partnership with parks, like the one that Claudia just described, is related to evaluation. So when you're thinking about what your organization, how you measure success, one of those success measures needs to be the changes that are happening in the natural resources, what's going on in recreation. Your organization and your staff probably don't have the time, the expertise, a lot of other things to like go out and what are the natural resource indicators that are telling me that things are happening on the ground, whether they're positive or negative. And so later in June, Leave No Trace is going out to Sonoma County, to Santa Rosa, and we're going to do some great workshops with hospitality stakeholders out there. But we're also going to be meeting with the regional parks partners and their staff to start brainstorming what are those indicators that we have for this year. So there's a strategic plan that's been put in place around stewardship, and part of that plan rests on how do we know that there are changes that are happening in the natural world. And the land managers are such a great resource for that because we need to triangulate what those things look like. Land managers don't go out and count the amount of trash every day and then say, oh, well, it's decreasing. There are this many less Starbucks cups. That's not how it works. There are ways you can triangulate how much the county or how much land managers are spending on trash removal, how much they're spending in terms of time and cleaning with restrooms that might be there, how much work they're doing in the search and rescue realm potentially, which most definitely has data that goes along with it. There are indicators that say we've had this many instances of nuisance wildlife whether it's a raccoon or a bear or something else that becomes habituated to humans and desires food from humans. So there are all these great indicators that we can say, you know how we know it worked? Because we were running these education campaigns, because visitors said they were more aware of it, and because the natural resource is showing this level of improvement. And those things contribute. And that's actually what speaks really loudly to the community. People can see through greenwashing sustainability efforts really easily. When you can show them those indicators, or we can bring them into the conversation to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about, what do you think? You're not giving them the veto power necessarily, but you're giving them a space for input. So when you do that and then can show them these great indicators and measures, which may indicate success or not, then you can say, this is what we're trying to do. And that's what the community will back you up on, is the fact that you're trying to do this. Talia is going to take us over to case study number 2 about Big Bay, Michigan.
Okay. I did want to say that I go to Sonoma County all the time because I live in Northern California, and I'm really proud of all the work that's being done there. And actually, last time I was up there, pointed it out to my family that this is the kind of work that we try to do, and so just applauds to the whole team. So Big Bay, it's actually interesting to contrast the two. So I was the marketing lead for a project in Big Bay, Michigan, a very rural destination, and also very new to tourism development. So you kind of can see Sonoma County is very sophisticated. It's been in the tourism industry for a very long time. This is a brand new destination in the Upper Peninsula. So I worked with the Center for Responsible Travel on a project that was actually funded by a mining company. I bring up the funding because there's a lot of interesting ways that you can actually get funds to help do this kind of work. So in this specific case, this part of the Upper Peninsula had a lot of extractive industries, so forestry, in this case mining, and the mine was leaving, I think in 3 years at the time we started, so I think they've already left. So they have this corporate social responsibility arm called the Lundin Foundation, which was funding economic development in Big Bay, and they decided actually that because of the landscape, which I'll show you in a second, that this was a great opportunity for tourism for development. So they funded this project, and I was hired by the Center for Responsible Travel to do the marketing part of it. So I'm just showing you this video. It actually has no audio, just to show you kind of the landscape and why we went in the direction we did with this project. So this is Big Bay. It's pristine. It's absolutely gorgeous. I would say I've been to fall foliage all over America, and this is absolutely incredible. So it's a beautiful landscape. It's very rural. There were almost no bathrooms anywhere. I'm just going to speak from personal experience, but it's an incredible place. And they're in Marquette County, so they are in a pretty established destination, but this community itself, this township, was pretty small. So as you can see, it's a pretty small place. It's a very special place, and it's also very quirky. So we started out this project by just doing a lot of community engagement. So we did a big workshop there. We had 50 people, and like everyone from the community came out, like woodworkers. We had like the snow blowing community, like the snowmobiling community. We had hunters, fishermen, the 3 hotels that were in town. We did a big visioning workshop on, what do you want to do in tourism? How do you want to market your destination? And we asked questions like, what do you want to share with visitors, and what don't you want to share with visitors? Are there places that you don't want people to go? And funnily enough, there were some things that they're like, we don't want people to go to Little Garlic Lake or Little Garlic River. That is our place. We don't want tourists to go there. And we gave the community the opportunity to shape how they wanted to come to market and what they wanted to say about their destination. So to me, that's kind of the epitome of sustainability, is really having the community there at the forefront. So this is just our little breakout session here, and everyone was kind of debating of what they wanted to talk about, what they didn't want to talk about, and also the different positioning. So after being in a destination for a week and then talking to probably 100 people, we came up with this brand promise. And I share this with you not because this is about branding, but more because their product really is nature. So to provide access to a 4 seasons wilderness experience in an uncrowded setting. So if that's not sustainable tourism, I don't really know what is. So they are, hunting, fishing, skiing destination. And people go there because It's not like Pictured Rocks, which is actually down the way. It's not crowded. You're not going to have 1,000 people there. We were there in like peak fall foliage, and we were like one of 4 people on the trails, you know? So that's really the experience that people are looking for, and sustainability is really baked into this brand and how the community wanted to develop their tourism. Everyone said they were really worried about being sort of the Disneyland, sorry to use that metaphor in Orlando, the Disneyland of Michigan. So they wanted to keep it uncrowded. So I'm just showing a little bit of the brand pillars and the brand voice. The community also came up with this, and we kind of helped facilitate that exercise. So they wanted to be friendly and rugged. They wanted to be that destination that's still going to be comfortable in their flannel shirts and, you know, be who they are. It's a really quirky place. Actually, Henry Ford used to live there. He has one of the hotels is his former, I think they call it an executive retreat. Anatomy of a Murder was also filmed there. If you're in a noir film buff, it's a really cool movie about a murder in that town. And they also wanted to bake into their brand, of course, the different wilderness experiences that they have there. So I'm not going to read all of this. It's more just to talk about the experience. And they also wanted to keep the experience unrefined. They don't want to develop the trails. They don't want to make everything so sort of like a national park. National parks are very orchestrated. That's part of the experience. But they are keeping it a little more rustic, and that's part of what they want to do. So through this project, we were able to partner with the county of Travel Marquette. I show this example because maybe some of you are from DMOs like this. We created a lot of value for them, and it cost them absolutely no money. So basically, we just called up Travel Marquette and said, hey, we're doing this project. We're scoped to create like 15 articles, and I think it was like an hour of video footage. Will you publish it for us? So Travel Marquette really only had to create this landing page for us and put the content we created on their site, and it didn't really cost Travel Marquette much, and it cost the project nothing. So I say this because think about who you can partner with on sustainability. It might not need to cost you anything. It might be your time. It might be just being out there in the destination and having those conversations. But now Travel Marquette works really closely with Big Bay. This webpage was launched like 2 years ago, and they're still having those conversations with them, and they're really great marketing partners. And then here's just one of the partner programs that we worked on. So we hired a photographer as part of the project. We gave the content to Travel Marquette, and you could see they published it on their social channels. So having Big Bay set up their own social channels didn't really make sense because they were a really small community. But having a partner who already had the reach and the voice do it for them and help amplify their story was much more effective. So that's it from Big Bay, but if I'm here afterwards if you have any questions.
Thanks, Talia. So the next case study is not a destination, but this is something that takes place in every destination, in every park, everywhere. How many people have ever seen an overflowing trash can? How many people think overflowing trash cans are problematic? What are some of the reasons why overflowing trash cans are problematic? Wildlife encourages people to litter. Why does it encourage people to litter? Where are they going to put it? Yeah. Nate? Trash will blow away. It might get blown into a body of water that we can't see. There might be food waste in here. Trash like this is problematic. I call this the trash can conundrum because where the journey I'm going to take you on this very short case study is sometimes we perceive the issue to be coming from one place, but it's really rooted somewhere else. I actually like this picture. The reason I like this picture is because there is trash in bags for the most part. There is not trash scattered all around. So humans intentionally put the trash in the bags and then put them into the receptacle that we've all been trained to know this is where trash goes, right? So even though this is overflowing and some has spilled out onto the ground, this much less trash is not in waterways, is not in forested areas or on mountainous areas, things like that. So a lot of people during the pandemic and certainly before it, when we think about, over-tourism, overcrowding trash cans, this is a really big issue. It turns out people are trying to do the right thing. The issue is the container. The issue is how frequently the container is emptied. So there have been lots of conversations that travel professionals have been having during the pandemic about there are some new things that we need to make these like kind of big pivots and like monumental shifts in how we do things. We need to think differently. We need to approach problems differently. Land managers are not immune to that, but they aren't coming around to it nearly as willingly. And I love land managers, but they're kind of like my relative who I don't see very often, who I really love, but you know, Uncle Ned really is a nice person. Sometimes they don't get it. And so it's like, what do you mean we need to increase the size of the trash can? People should just bring their trash home with them. That's a short-term solution. That's a Band-Aid. That's something that we could encourage people to do. Hey, when you see overflowing trash cans, don't contribute to them because wildlife, because water contamination, because it could blow away. Instead, think about bringing it home with you while our land managers work to increase the carrying capacity of these areas. So it's great that people want to spend time outdoors. It's great that people are trying to do the right thing. But all sectors need to kind of think about how do we approach things differently. This is not a typical, this picture I think, this comes from, I forget where this picture is taken, but this is not in the United States. This is not a typical trash can that we would see at a park here in the US. We'd see like the metal burn barrel, oil barrel kind of trash can, or maybe a dumpster, something like that. So again, the reason I bring this up is because we often point at visitors for being like, they're the reason for this and we need to not encourage visitors to come. Instead, the container's just not the right container. The frequency of emptying it's not the right frequency. Our infrastructure doesn't support a carrying capacity for the number of people that we want coming to our destination. So unless we're taking the stance, we're limiting the number of people who are coming in, and there are permit systems and things that do that, then this problem is going to continue until that infrastructure changes. And I guarantee you that any parks that have permit systems, like national parks, they still have this problem. It's always been a problem, it always will be, until we work together to try and increase the size of cans, until we try and increase the frequency of these things being taken out. Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. Leave no trace in Sonoma County, we've been doing this as well. We say, pack it out, but pack it all the way out. But that can be problematic because let's say this is a park in your destination. What's surrounding that park might be the gateway community or the small town, and their trash infrastructure definitely can't handle visitor trash on top of what might already be there. We see that a lot in tribal nations here in the lower 48s or Alaskan Native villages, where the infrastructure is barely supporting it supports the community's needs and that's it. And so when we add visitor, that's an issue. One way that visitors can play a role, though, is to bring less items in, bring less throwaway items in. And so that's some great messaging, whether you call it know before you go or plan ahead and prepare. But before you come out, minimize the amount of trash you're bringing with you. Put food that you know you're going to cook into a reusable container before you leave your house. Deposit the trash at your house. You're going to have the trash or waste either way until manufacturers change what they're going to do, but you can limit the amount of throwaway waste that you bring in. So that could be messaging that we can put out to people. So the pack it in, pack it out works really well, but we do need to give people a solution, where can they put it? Some people might be willing to take it all the way home with them. Some people are not. But every little bit makes a difference. So that's the trash can conundrum case study. Case study number 4 is a callback to Outdoor NC. We heard about Outdoor NC today from Heidi Walters. And I just want to bring this up, that Outdoor NC is this great program that is working to support the investment that North Carolina has made in their trails network. We saw this graphic earlier about the return on their $26 million investment and what it has made the difference in 4 years' time since 28. This study is from 2018. They've been trail building for the last 5 years or so. So to protect that, Outdoor NC has really taken an approach that Claudia described, an approach that many of you are thinking about in terms of sustainability and how do we engage people, and really tapping into kind of people's emotions and heartstrings and inclusion too. So I want to play you a quick video from Outdoor NC that they're using to promote the outdoors.
My name is Asher and I love being outside. My dad told me if you love something, you should take care of it. So we practice leave no trace. When we go hiking, we always try to stay on the trails and carry out all of our trash. My mom says it's important to take only pictures and leave only footprints. Because when we all do our part, we can protect the places we love.
So that's a 60-second asset that they have turned into a 30 and a 15 spot. And they actually make all three of those videos available in their partner toolkit for anybody who's a part of their Outdoor NC initiative to increase people's awareness of responsible travel when in outdoor spaces, and to ultimately change people's behavior. That's kind of the sweet spot formula for environmental, increasing awareness and then modifying people's behaviors. These case studies where Talia and I haven't gone with this are responsible travel things like carbon offsets, like shopping locally and what that means, sourcing from local producers. Like those are all important arms of sustainability as well. I don't mean to, I hope it doesn't feel like that isn't important because they haven't been included here, but the natural world, because it's such a draw for all of us, because so many people are getting outdoors, this is a really great opportunity. And then we can further bring those people in who are the foodies. We can further bring those people in who have kind of the global sense of what can I contribute to. Carbon offset programs are great, but they aren't accessible to everybody. But they're accessible to some, and that's better than none. The last case study that I want to talk about is something that I call microdosing your sustainability touch points. And I use that term microdosing on purpose. You all have something that land managers, you have two big things that land managers don't have. One, you have a great marketing background, you're creative. Again, land manager's great. My Uncle Ned, he's amazing, but he doesn't have the marketing background to communicate rules and regulations in a way that resonate with people beyond just rules and regulations. The other thing that you all have are touch points with people way before their trip even starts. Raise your hand if you think social media is the dominant form of media today. Most people. I would say yes also. There's probably some scientific literature to back up that assertion that we all have, but everybody's on social media. Oh, Talia thinks it might be radio. That's probably true. Well, social media is up there. It's not print. It's not guidebooks. Let me relate to that. It's not a guidebook. Social media, that's where people get all their information from. When people are planning their trips, whether it's 6 months in advance or 2 days in advance, they're going to social media, they're going to all these spots, they're taking inspiration from these things, whether they know it or not. And their next stop after social media is to start making reservations. People have been doing reservations for years, and reservation systems have gotten really advanced and really simplified, and we've learned about some great ways that accessibility is being built into like reservation systems and how you can search for things and all that. So that's something that not many land managers have. Believe it or not, like a state park in Colorado, where I come from, They may have a campground, but they don't have access to that reservation system. The network, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, has access to that reservation system, but that's like way up high. That's like Washington, D.C. having access to, whatever at the state level. Similarly, there are some national parks that don't have access to their reservation system because it goes through reservations.gov, which is not formally associated with the national parks. They partner very closely, but it's two very different entities. You all, however, and your partners have access to your reservation system, and that is the power that you all carry for reaching visitors with this idea of microdosing. So no matter what your sustainability topic may be, shopping locally, protecting the outdoors, being responsible visitors to cultural heritage sites, things like that, you have the power to affect a big change if you utilize your reservation systems in low-dose ways. And what I mean by low dose is not sending them 3 paragraphs worth of information about this. It's sending them the widget graphic, the 3-word thing that reminds people about sustainability in your destination. Perhaps you're giving them some did you know kind of information about the community, about the natural resource, how people can make a difference. You might link them to different things that are going on in your community, but you can do that because of your reservation systems. This steps of the visitor experience is something that we have all gone through. We all went through it here coming to Orlando. We've all gone through it on our personal trips as well. The first stage is anticipation. We're thinking about our trip. If we're planning a totally new trip, and I'm camping with my family, it's where do I want to go camping? Oh, I really want to check out Sylvan Lake State Park in Eagle, Colorado. I've never been there before. So I'm thinking about that trip. I'm thinking about when am I going to go? What do I need to do? What reservations do I need? When am I going to hook up the camper to the truck? All these things that are part of the anticipation phase, but it's getting me excited for my trip. It's also when I'm making reservations, which I did at Sylvan Lake State Park. But there are other types of reservations. There are hotel bookings, there are guide and outfitter bookings, there are restaurant bookings. So all that anticipation phase leads to the travel too. We're finally driving, we're finally going, we're stopping along the way, we're staying in Eagle before we go on our camping trip. We're eating at the local establishment kind of en route, but we're still going to the park. And then we get on site. So now I'm on site in this wonderful destination, and finally I get to interact with other human beings like the land managers or the hospitality professionals or the person who's serving me at the restaurant or whatever it might be during my trip. And that's where visitor satisfaction and engagement outcomes really are generated. It's not generated during anticipation and travel to phase. So then my trip concludes, and then I go back home, and that's the travel back. And rarely during the travel back phase are we're usually tired. We're thinking about how great that was, but we're also thinking about, there are about 9,000 emails in my inbox. Monday's coming up tomorrow. All the O's that we can possibly think of. Once we do get back, and once we kind of get back into what we're doing, we get into the recollection phase. And for some people, the recollection phase might actually take place during travel back. That might be in the car. When my kid's sleeping in the car, and I'm driving silently, and it's great, I can think about, wow, Sylvan Lake was really awesome. That was amazing. I can start having this great recollection of all the experiences I had in Eagle, Colorado, and all the great things that we did. For some people, it might not kick in for a week later, or it might be down the line. But I guarantee you, because of the really great experience I had at Sylvan Lakes, I want to go back there. I want to go back to Eagle, Colorado. I want to go back to all your destinations where I was a visitor because I had such a good time. And that recollection phase, I can't tell you how many people I told about Sylvan Lakes and said, hey, have you ever been here before? It was so great, you've got to go. Or you should come with us next time. And you all know better than I do that your best customers are your return visitors. Return visitors have gotten a dose of what your destination offers, but there's so much more, and they might be bringing more people with them. And so we all go through this, and the power that you all have is to reach people in these 4 areas through your reservation systems, because you can hit people in the anticipation phase when they make the booking. You can have another touch point with them in the travel to phase, or for the day or so before they arrive to a destination or to a hotel. And certainly on site, there are so many ways that you can message. There have been discussions about geofencing and other ways that we can use digital media and target messaging at people, and that's something you could do on site. Also, they're going to get it when they visit open spaces and trails and parks and things like that. And then there's the recollection phase. When that person leaves your destination, you don't hit empty the trash on that data, and you don't get rid of their emails. You want to keep inviting those people back. And so they stay in there. Of course, they can opt out, they can unsubscribe, but most people, I think a large portion, stay. That's where this is so powerful for hitting people in reservation systems, and you're doing it with just a little bit of information. You're sending them to your homepage or to your partner's homepage. In Sonoma County, we actually, the Leave No Trace team worked with the Sonoma County tourism team and generated reservation text copy that wineries and hotels and other lodging professionals can put into their email, so they don't have to generate it on their own. It's just copy and paste and put it right in there. And it's like 3 sentences long. It includes a hyperlink back to, hey, come learn more about the Sonoma County Leave No Trace initiative. For you all, that might be, hey, come learn more about the our local food sourcing. Come learn more about other sustainability efforts that we have going on. And you will see click-through rates. You will see engagement with that. But it's only a little bit of information. You're doing it frequently, though. The frequency is what matters. Here's another visual example of what that traveler experience can look like and where you can get people. So even before they make a reservation anywhere, they might be getting information from a website or from social media. That's where your registration starts. And you can see all of the opportunities that you have to talk about sustainability. I use this model when I talk to guides and outfitters. Rainier Mountaineering Incorporated, which is in Ashford, Washington, is a big Leave No Trace supporter. They teach Leave No Trace on all of their expeditions, whether it's Mount Rainier or Mount Baker to Denali to Everest. They talk about Leave No Trace. And we use this model with them, and we say, look, it's so easy for you all to do this. Copy and paste where you need to, but then rely on your really well-equipped guide staff and other people who are passionate about this and bring their story into what they're doing to focus on the on-site experience and give context to those hyperlinks and to all that text that they saw. So with the time that we have left, we're going to dive into your three-year plan, 5-year plan. And that's what these worksheets are here for you to use. Since you all are kind of in this already, again, treat this as more of an audit tool rather than a starting place. What I'm going to liken this to, this is a logic model that we use for kind of planning out intentionality around sustainability or stewardship or whatever label you want to get it. A lot of people I mentioned earlier start here in the activities phase. They start by, wow, sustainability is great. Let's create some social media slides and put it out there. And there's no plan beyond that. So it's this like really high expectation for something that only gets 15 seconds of fame. And instead, we should be starting with what's the overall impact that we want to have, and then work backwards. And if you work backwards, then you're building yourself a roadmap for what the future can look like. What I liken it to is key lime pie. If you were going to make key lime pie, you would not start by going into your refrigerator and your pantry and saying, what goes into key lime pie? You wouldn't guess. You wouldn't start just putting things into a bowl. Maybe you do it from like an experimental thing. You have kids, it's some fun, whatever. But if you really want to eat key lime pie, you're not going to do that. Key lime pie needs a recipe. Key lime pie needs very specific things in a sequenced order. And if you don't know that information ahead of time, all the effort that you're going to have may feel like the right thing in the moment, or maybe even may feel a little uncomfortable, but you're not going to end up with the result you have. And that's what focusing on your intended results first will help you do. It helps you get the recipe before you start doing any of the cooking, before you start doing any of the baking. So this resource that you have in front of you, I call this the beginning of your 5-year plan, the audit tool. You're going to have a time to go through this, but think about the issues and opportunities that you want to approach. Think about the steps that you'll take to get there, the challenges that may arise, the partners to seek out, and then your next steps. And when you finish this worksheet, you will have those next steps for what an audit can look like, evaluation, or expanding your sustainability. So the starting place, though, I want you to focus on the our vision and our goals area. So go ahead and answer the prompts that you see here on your worksheet. Think about what those mean. Take doodle notes if you want to. I'm going to put some examples up just so you have background for what it can look like if you're curious. I apologize that the text behind the red is a little blurry, but you have all of that in front of you. So what are the issues that I want to address? Well, my destination, promotes the environment to our visitors, but trails are impacted and residents want us to stop telling people to visit. That's what we're trying to address. The dimensions of sustainability that we want to focus on are healing the environment, cultural heritage protection, resident and community experience, and the quality of our product and services. And then as a result of our sustainability efforts, what happens? This is that visionary thing. It doesn't need to be measurable. But what happens in a year, 5 years, 20 years as a result of doing these things? And then once you have those three, you can write your goal. So therefore, our goal for promoting sustainability is to reduce negative impacts to our natural resource and improve our residents' quality of life by educating our visitors about responsible travel practices. So I'm going to leave this example up, but take a few minutes to just brainstorm what that might look like for you all. And if you find that you've worked through this first half, you can certainly move on to the next half of the sheet if you'd like. But take a few more minutes. These don't need to be like fully fleshed out thoughts. This is really it's meant to be a whiteboard in front of you, so to speak. Would anybody like to share the goal that they brainstormed? Okay, no takers yet. I'm going to ask again in a little while. So we're going to move on to part 2 of this. If you're still working on part 1, that's okay. So part 2 is the planning phase. So now that you have your goal in mind, or at least a semblance of a goal, you can go into kind of these four areas of planning. And because you all are currently doing sustainability initiatives, this is actually perfect. Use the first block on the left. What initiatives are we currently implementing that may help us reach our sustainability goal? and go ahead and brainstorm or write down the list of things that you're doing. That might be a pledge program. That might be social media communications. That might be a resident-led advisory group. That might be on-the-ground activation or trash cleanup, things like that. I emphasize the word may, or the phrase may help us in there, because we don't actually know the efficacy of those programs as they relate to your goal. So we're just making the assumption that they might help us, they might not help us. But for right now, we're just getting everything kind of on the plate, so to speak, so we can have it in front of us. The next bit is about the challenges that we need to solve in order to reach our goal. So what are like 3 things that immediately come to mind? The ones that I was thinking about, and there's some examples up here for you, is I don't know the current or the efficacy of my current efforts. I know impressions data. My organization does not have a definition of sustainability yet, and sustainability or stewardship is not actually built into our strategic plan that we have, that we are very proud of and worked for 18 months on, but it's not baked into that. So those are 3 challenges that I identified. The box on the far right talks about what kind of return on investment do you seek? So we saw some great return on investment numbers from North Carolina about trail dollars. So your return on investment might relate to the economy. It might relate to visitor experiences. It might relate to resident satisfaction. It might relate to improved trail conditions of the natural resource. And again, I apologize that the background is a little blurry, but the red text that's meant to be the example should be easier to read. What partners should we engage as we work towards our goal? Use this at totally brainstorm. The sky's the limit. Land managers, tribal nations in our corner of the state, local education nonprofits, hotel associations, restaurant associations, the winery that's in our county, the great brewery that we have. Literally all of your stakeholders can play a role, because it goes back to the idea of microdosing. Some of these stakeholders, though, are going to be really important for the building part of this. Land managers, tribal partners, if you have relationships or desire to have relationships with them. And then after you do all that planning, the green box, which is kind of the conclusion of this worksheet, but is meant to be the jumping off point for you. So what are your immediate next steps? Now that you've gone through this, now that you have a goal, you've identified your motivations, you've identified some of the planning aspects of this, what needs to happen next? This is not, what you're walking away with is not a 5-year plan. What you're walking away with is the on-ramp for your 5-year plan. So you can take this back, you can start engaging your colleagues in your team about this, you can start asking questions, you can run this up to the people that you need to include in this, but this is very much meant to be that on-ramp tool, because any strategic planning organization that you work with will ask you these very similar questions. And if you already have these, if you're already thinking about them, then you're going to be able to jump past the asset gathering phase really quickly with anybody you decide to bring into this, if you decide to bring anybody into this conversation. So take a couple more minutes. It is just after 5 now. This session is supposed to go until 5:15, I believe. But we're going to end here. I will wrap up, but just take a few more minutes. We'll see if anybody wants to share. If you do, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. But I'll conclude here, and I'll stop talking for a second, just for a second. I'm sorry? Oh, the idea of microdosing? Sure. Has anybody heard that term before? Microdosing? Okay. Microdosing is a low amount of something that people take or encounter frequently. And what that does is it doesn't, it kind of creates this state where I'm going to relate it back to education. What it gets is this education state where we're getting low touches of education messaging, and it's not me from Leave No Trace standing on a soapbox and giving you a 2-hour spiel about the 7 principles. Instead, it's focusing on like, hey, you can make a difference by planning ahead and bringing less disposable items to the park. See you on Sunday when you come. Like that kind of messaging. You can fill in the blanks, obviously, with whatever you want, but end it with, see you on Sunday, we're glad you're here. Those things you can repeat over and over again with all the different ways that you can reach people. And so it does rely on frequency. So if you do that microdose, that like low dose messaging only one time, it's not going to work. You all as marketers know you need to hit people frequently. But with something like environmental stewardship, it can be very effective. And think about if you had partners. I'm going to use Arizona as an example. The state of Arizona has a program called Appreciate AZ. Appreciate AZ is their sustainability engagement program that taps into visitors and residents. It's important not to exclude residents because I'm a resident of Colorado, but when I travel to the western slope of Colorado, I'm very much a visitor to that area. Appreciate AZ has some really great partners that are also providing this messaging. So let's say they can send out reservation details, or they have a website that has this kind of low dose of great sustainability messaging. And then when I get to Phoenix, when I go to the Camelback Inn in Scottsdale, and I go to my room, I can also see, oh, there's the QR code for like learning more about Appreciate AZ. Here's the information about climbing Camelback Mountain, why it's important to bring this much water with me as it relates to Appreciate AZ. So it's like very kind of low touches, and it's everywhere around me. I encounter it when I go to the restaurants. I encounter it when I go to the guide and outfitter. I might encounter it when I go to the Grand Canyon. I will certainly encounter Leave No Trace when I go to the Grand Canyon, but maybe not exactly Appreciate AZ. The point is that dosing is happening all around me, and it's a reminder. Hotels do this a lot. I'm not sure where everybody's staying, but I'm sure you've stayed in a hotel before where they give kind of like the eco reminders. Like on the mirror in the bathroom, it's like, did you know this many gallons of water are used when yada, yada, yada. Please shut off the water when you're not using it. Thank you for staying. That's an example of like low dose messaging, or what we call low dose messaging. That can be effective, but we need to see it multiple places. Usually it's only on the bathroom mirror. So if we can have it more places, that would be great, especially around water conservation. But it needs to be relevant to where it is. So in that scenario, I suppose it makes sense. But for something like sustainability, this could literally be anywhere. And if you include geofencing as a technique, as a tactic into what you do, you're going to be able to reach people like when they come into your destination, when they come into the county, when they enter the state, or certain hot spots that might be like really in need of like visitors taking this really proactive action. Does anybody want to share their goal that they came up with? Yes. Can I give you the microphone real quick?
My goal was more positive visitor and host community resident sentiment as a result of our partnership engagement.
Great. What were some of the planning steps that you thought about related to that?
Well, I agreed with you that the partners that we should engage should be really holistic, like the hotels, the tribal partners, the restaurants, the outdoor recreation suppliers. Currently, so I work for the Arizona Office of Tourism, so Appreciate AZ has been amazing. The key messaging has been woven into our social media. Our partnerships are very valuable in communicating the principles to our visitors, and then we do have that stewardship element in our strategic plan. And the goal that we're looking for is, that long-term international, just higher quality stay for our visitors.
So, appreciate AZ is very static, but they're active. It's not a box that the Arizona Office of Tourism team, Eleanor's team, is checking. It's not a finish line. Like, great, we finished. This is built into their strategic plan. This is built into their strategic plan moving forward in what they do. And as Eleanor described, now they have a further on-ramp to what year 2 and year 3 and year 4 can look like. And they have staff that can support that. But even if they didn't have the staff that could support it, even if they didn't have Colleen Floyd as the Director of Research at the Arizona Office of Tourism, they would still be able to tap in and use a resource like this to understand who can we utilize for visitor sentiment, who can we utilize for stakeholder sentiment. Most times with that kind of data and getting the sentiment back, this is not rigorous academic data that you are going to publish in the Journal of Tourism Sustainability Now. This is something that is usually a convenience sample, meaning you know who the people are, especially if they're your stakeholders, but that's okay. It's okay to have that because that data makes a difference. It brings, especially for your stakeholders, it brings them into the conversation for what this is and keeps them engaged, especially if they were a part of it from the beginning. So just to conclude, Talia and I, we know we threw a lot at you around sustainability and what this is. And there are going to be a lot more conversations tomorrow from Claudia and from a number of other folks around different facets of sustainability, how it relates to destination stewardship, this idea of going beyond just marketing. There's going to be a great session tomorrow that basically kind of highlights all of the nonprofit groups that are kind of working in this space that you could partner with and kind of breaks them down. Like, here's what you need to know. And so that's going to be a really great kind of opportunity to see who's out there. But I hope that this planning session gave you a little more to think about in terms of how you're auditing your own current sustainability efforts. I thank you for your participating in this workshop, and I hope that it was helpful for thinking like, great, outcomes are really something that can make a difference, and we can go beyond just like the impression metrics. And I don't mean to assume that everybody here is using impression metrics, but those measurable outcomes really do make the difference. I will certainly be around for a little while. Talia will be around for a little while. We'll both be here tomorrow as well. So thanks again. Let us know if you have any questions.